Well, this morning I was awakened early, and it's because my dreamscape put me into a conversation with Pluto. The how should I put this? The energy that is being expressed through the Plutonic window can often appear just a bit on the intense side. And this definitely was an intense conversation that I tuned into. And even as I say that, I'm actually going to go to the chart for today because this is Sunday, by the way. And Sunday is where the energy, really kicks up as far as this Plutonic dance goes. And I say that because of this square that's happening between Mars and Pluto, the two rulers of Scorpio. And it's a square. Squares aren't necessarily easy energies to live into. Challenges are afoot. Anyway, back to my conversation with Pluto. I'm trying to think of the best way to present this. There isn't an easy way to put this because of the overt intensity of Plutonic transformational energy that is in play always with Pluto. I could put in this caveat that how effectively we have this engagement with this Plutonic substance has everything to do with how tuned in we are to what it is ownership means to us. I say this quite deliberately because the Plutonian perspective really is far more to the idea of, being quite clear on what ownership means to you. Because if you're just owning things for the heck of it, just because ownership seems like the right thing to do, then it's highly likely that what it is you think you own actually owns you. And Pluto, what its function is to awaken us to that field of ownership in such a way that we might be able to effectively reduce the footprint of our ownership from the material standpoint. Do I have too much? Yeah, I do have too much. Might I need to get rid of some things? Yeah, I do need to get rid of some things. And where the rub of this Mars-Pluto square comes into play today, it's Sunday, by the way, and I say it's exact today, but it's basically been in effect for the last few days and will be in effect for the next several days. Oh boy, ways to be able to put this. That conversation with Pluto this morning, what I'm being shown is Mars, the warrior god, in square to Pluto, the life-death cycle process as being, overtly challenging right now. And part of the challenge that I was engaged with Pluto about this morning was that in the material aspect of life, there are certain cultural containers on this planet that we live with, hopefully with, that have overextended their material footprint to the degradation of this, you can say the degradation of the resource level of planet Earth. But this is only for those things which we think we need. And this is really, really significant because it's highly likely we don't need as much as our Western cultural society paradigm has trained us to thinking is the case. Oh, no, not. We could get by with far less. And the footprint that each of us creates as we do this dance with life at the material level has repercussions well beyond anything that any of us might be privy to currently. But I thought about warrior god in square to Pluto. I knew this. Yeah, it was part of the dream. And one of the footprints, if you will, of the warring aspect here on planet Earth has to do with resource allocation or resource, shall we say, obtainment. Our Western culture has been inclined ever since to utilize the planet as its grab basket, to go get the resources from wherever we can get them, not necessarily willing to recognize what the obtainment of those resources involves at all levels. Not just we need that coal so that we can smoke up the air while we're making energy to, keep us warm in our cold winter houses. No, not something quite that simple. But what are the effects on where the coal came from? What are the effects on the people that we obtained whatever the resource is that we got to make our lives better? What's their life like? No, doesn't matter because, we are obviously the most important people on the planet because we have the control of all these resources. Me wondereth. Have there been perhaps just a wee bit of short-sightedness in this? And the military aspect that we utilize in order to pull this off. There's that Mars factor that I was talking about. I could feel it in my bones as I was trying to, wrestle with this Plutonic thing saying, am I willing from a Plutonic perspective to recognize that the Martian warring aspect is ready and willing to kill for control at whatever level that is required to make our lives better? Or from the perspective of those whose lives are not better, am I willing to kill, to contain those people that think they are better than us? These factors are in play. The Hamas thing that happened, I really didn't pay any attention to the news yesterday, but I woke up this morning and watched a little news and I went, holy shit. Bad times for some folks. And, there are a lot of reasons for it, but more than likely it has a lot to do with the very thing that I'm talking to you about. Our overextension of getting the resources to benefit some but not all beings on this planet is right at the crux of the imbalance and retribution that is being enacted upon those of us that think we are better off by those who have been affected by this attitude. And, irony of ironies is that the resources of the planet being utilized for warring purposes, sponsored by companies that basically supply the warring tools to both sides of any equation because they're making money both ways. Doesn't matter who wins. The longer the war, the better, because we make a better profit. And those investing in those companies are kind of like, yeah, we're getting a good return on our money. People are dying, but so what? I'm getting a good return on my money. You might sense I got a little angst this morning, because that energy is just unsustainable. Now, let's take a look at what else is happening this week. Monday, Venus shifts out of Leo, where it's been for a very long season, into Virgo. And so and we're still in the Libra season, so Venus has some significance. I think that one thing to keep in mind is that with Venus shifting out of Leo, which is a lot more adventurous than Virgo is, and willing to take chances, is that perhaps the capacities that we have to, think more specifically, energetically on appropriateness is being, infused more particularly now into this arena of the Libra, how we interact with one another. And Venus is going to be there in Virgo for 3 weeks or so. I think that's about how long it takes for it to go through a sign these days. So it's a shift in that energetic experience of that getting along with one another process brings to the table. And if you think of Libra is about that arena as to what is the most appropriate way to interact with one another. Venus going into Virgo says we need to find an appropriate vehicle that allows us to work together. Essential Virgo, And this is a challenge from the Venus perspective, because people say, oh, Venus is all about partnerships and relationships. Well, actually, the Venus part in any one of us is the arena wherein the partnership factor is put onto the front burner, and it's heated up to such a fashion where one has to make some sort of a technique or understanding or a developmental way of being able to recognize what is partnership. How do I get along with others who don't necessarily see things the same way that I do? This is the lesson of Libra. It's not just automatically, we're going to be in partnership and stuff, because that interaction with one another, stuff comes up that isn't necessarily the most comfortable all the time. And what Libra is about is finding that balance of where is the line that is me and the line that is you, and what's that space in between? What's going to transpire in there? Because that's the Libra dance. Finding that ebb and flow of the tide of life that allows us to function for a season, because not all seasons last forever, whereby in this Libra conjunction kind of an experience, we're going to learn something from one another that is beneficial to our individual growth, but as well our collective growth. I don't want to forget the Mars-Pluto square that's at work, because it's, that Mars in Libra saying, oh yeah, by the way, while you're doing this consideration of, how good it is to get along with one another, there's some edginess in the air. Because obviously not everybody's getting along well with one another. There are warring factors in play that, from a Plutonic perspective, are going to require people to die. That's just the way it is. Doesn't have to be that way. But in the modern, what should we say, competitive and resource-based lifestyles that have been essentially sold to us as the only way to be, those are the results. We get to Tuesday, the 10th. All kinds of things happen on Tuesday. If you happen to be in one of those places that doesn't have the overcast rainy weather like we do here in the Pacific Northwest, if you look up in the sky, you will see the moon and Venus coming up early in the morning, sitting there together. And then, when the moon and Venus get together, it's like, I'll look at something real quick. So moon's at 14 declination, Venus is at 9 declination. They're both north, so they're going to be relatively close together. That's a latitude thing that I'm looking at there. They're going to be relatively close together in the sky. The moon, how do you feel about Venus? What does it mean to hang together? And the two beings, those celestial beings, coming together in the sky to put on a celestial dance show for us in the early morning sky. It says the chances that on this day, Tuesday by the way, we might be able to feel one another more specifically, that's in the air. How are you going to feel? We still have that edginess, the Mars-Pluto square, but, might we be willing to alter the trajectory that we're on in order to, find more of a common ground with one another? It is one of the options. Also on this day, our Mercury, this is wrong. I don't know what forget Mercury. Sun opposes Chiron on this day as well. Wounded healer, Chiron over there in Aries. Aries, self, an energetic impulse to start something. And, what's it going to involve? How are we going to be able to use that solar inclination toward presentation of Libra, a self, Sun, in Libra, in conjunction with others, in a way that we can provide some healing, or are we going to just provide that wounded part? The competitive side with one another, that I'm better than you are, you need to, respect that, or I'm going to kick your butt. I don't think that's the kind of healing process that might be the most beneficial for us, but it's that kind of energy, that Aryan kind of energy that is erupting in kind of a somewhat unpredictable way about discovering a self, Aries, and exchanging that with the Sun, the presentation of self, the solar self, the ruler, main focal energy of the solar system over there in the realm of other, saying that, well, if you really want to discover yourself and heal that from everything that you've got, you better be really paying attention to how are you interacting with each other. And on this day, Pluto, remember we were talking about Pluto up there? Stationing. It's stopping its retrograde cycle. When a planet shifts between retrograde and direct, or direct and retrograde, either direction, it comes to a standstill. Well, Mercury's been at 27 degrees of Capricorn for a long time. Basically, since the middle of September, and by the end of October, beginning of November, it's going to be moving into 28 degrees of things. So it's that focalized energy of how to utilize that last, those penultimate degrees of Capricorn. That's up. It's powerful. It's strong, Just curiously take a look and see if there's anything wonderful that the Sabian symbols might have to say about that degree. Let's see. A man becoming aware of spiritual force surrounding and assisting him. The realization at any level of existence that one is never alone. Oh, that fits right in with what I'm talking about. And that the community, visible or invisible, is sustaining one's effort. Are you willing, since Pluto is, a focus for this week, to allow aspects of yourself to die and pass away, and, perhaps even see the opportunity for being reborn anew by releasing those things that are not relevant to you as much as you might think they are, so that there's space for something else to put in an appearance. Yeah. Let's go on into the week. We'll go a couple more days. You can kind of see Mercury racing along, trying to catch up with that sun. Also, during this week, the moon will go from Leo on up into Scorpio, which means that we're gonna have a new moon this week. Well, it's not just a new moon; it's an eclipse new moon. Eclipses, new moons, basic in general. We'll get to that. Let's. Oh yeah, on this day, the 12th, Mars enters into Scorpio, a sign that it has traditional rulership for. That means the Martian energy, it's kicked up a little bit. And in true Scorpio fashion, we have to ask ourselves, not unlike the Pluto thought, are you willing to pass away and be reborn? This is essential Scorpio after all. And that Pluto energy over there, now standing at 27 degrees 53 minutes of Capricorn, is emphasizing that process of how, because Pluto has a affinity for Scorpio, let's see, the ruler of the underworld. People get dark images about that. And the reason they get dark images is because we have a hard time significantly grasping what it might mean to live a clean life, not encumbered by all the material side of us that tries to, rule over us in such a fashion that we didn't even know it was happening. And yet, it is. There's a book by Bernadette Brady called Predictive Astrology. That's a name. There are several books called Predictive Astrology, but she talks about the eclipses, and what she does is she looks at the chart, the initial chart that began any eclipse cycle, and walks it through the flavor that was initiated at that impulse, the first eclipse in that cycle. And that flavor, it goes through the whole entire eclipse cycle. Well, this particular one, which has a Mars equals Pluto and the new moon, which I thought was kind of interesting to see as this eclipse that we're going to have. Oops. On basically Saturday this week is up there within 10 degrees. It's going to be at 21 degrees of Libra, within 10 degrees of Mars. Little wide, you might say, but it's the sun. And the sun and the moon together. And because the moon moves so fast, within a day, it's going to catch up with Mars. So you cannot just throw that Martian factor out of the equation. Anyway, what Bernadette Brady writes about this particular eclipse cycle: the immense power, anger, and force of the Mars square Pluto is channeled into this family of eclipses via the trine. And it's, it was a trine when it started, but it's a square right now. So as we sit to initiate this next lunar cycle and set our intentions, which is always a new moon thing, the eclipse says there's a substantial level of change that must be included in this particular new moon that we should pay attention to if we're going to live appropriately. The individual experiencing this series will find that huge obstacles will suddenly and easily clear, or on the negative side, a pending potential crisis will suddenly manifest and move through his or her life very rapidly. Either way, the individual will feel that everything is moving at great speed. So, everything is moving at speed doesn't necessarily you may need to make sure that you're setting your intention that rapidly for what it is this next lunar cycle has in store for you. I would also throw in that Mercury, only a few degrees away from this new moon, has a bearing on what it is that we set as our intention. Is it thought out? Is it well thought out? I mean, really, have you, Mercury in Libra, considered what it is that you're considering with anybody else? So setting an intention for this particular lunar cycle coming up, initiated by this eclipse, asks us, am I clear? And is the clarity that I know in myself resonant with anybody else? This is the footing, the foundation for what it is that can transpire during this next lunar cycle. And I can't guarantee you it's going to be easy. I can guarantee you that you're going to be asked some hard questions about your footprint in life. And just where is it that you are headed? And is it sustainable? Very important. Is it sustainable? Okay. So many. I know that's a lot, and it's not necessarily the lightest consideration that I've had to present to you, but I tell you, when Pluto wakes you up in the morning with those kinds of thoughts, rest assured that there are factors in play that it would be foolish to just try and shine them on. There's something afoot right now, and not necessarily stable, that you can easily rely on. And how we might consider advancing appropriately with this process would be to, we're still in Libra, communicate with one another. Even if it feels uncomfortable, or maybe even especially if it feels uncomfortable. Compare notes. And be willing to do the work that is most effective in lightening your load. One of the things about Scorpio, which is what we're headed for, and we'll be talking more about that, is that it's like taking a path through the hell realms. And depending on how much shit you're packing with you, your load can either be light or heavy. And the effectiveness of making it on through to the other side. A song from back in the 60s just flashed through my head. I won't go into it. But you make it on through to the other side, the lighter your load is, the more likely that is to be the case, which is the other side, or being reborn anew. That's kind of the aim of Scorpio. Mars the Warrior just landed in Scorpio this week. So that energy, it's bringing its essence out of Libra. How do you interact with one another and trying to blend it at an intimate level with others in a way that says, we can do this together. It isn't just an individual process. After all, we are in the collective zone. That's all I got to have for you to consider for this week. And I know it's not light, but some days that's just the way it goes. Good luck. You can always reach out and talk to me. As an astrologer, I have some very unique insights at the individual chart level that might just blow your mind away. So, ciao, ciao. See you all next week.